Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello, I am Martin Ramsey, and the main event is back after a little break and Q&A. We are ready to pick the pace back up, and what a season to do in 2004-05, one of the greatest finals of all time, and all the narrative you could possibly want in between. Adam's here. How are we doing, Adam?
I am doing very well. Yeah, a nice little break. Q&A was good, but I've been keen to get into this one for the best part of 3 weeks now, I think. So yeah, buzzing for it.
Yeah, it's almost kind of holding you back, like one of those toys you just keep putting the wheels backwards and it's going to speed off like a train. David, are you as excited as Adam about 04-05 and the next 3 weeks that we have in store?
Certainly a lot of good memories of heading out to watch these matches in Kilmarnock Road, near where I lived at the time. Used to head out on a Tuesday and Wednesday to watch some of these, and some wonderful players. And of course, you know, a final that if you're a UK football fan, you're not allowed to forget. It gets mentioned constantly, but understandably so.
No Rangers, of course. As in Benfica, probably the biggest names to miss out. I don't know if I'm missing anyone else from that qualifying section, but another kind of the McLeish formula, Davey. Absolute disaster in qualifying usually sets us up for a good year.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because had we got past this, had Alex Ray avoided kicking someone in the head as well and getting himself a 5-game suspension, but had we got through this, then you know, is McLeish there for this season to end the way it ends? Because as we know, there are times this season he's perilously close, and had we been, and for people to say, well, Europe doesn't matter, yes, Europe did. At Maritimo, I think it's fairly well known by now, isn't it, that had that penalty shootout gone the other way. So had we gone into the Champions League playing the way we were playing at the start of the season as he was trying to knit this side together, there's every chance he does get emptied before, and that means no end to season, no helicopter Sunday. So yeah, it was a gutting one, 3-2. Craig Moore, of course, going to the Olympics rather than playing for us, which spelled the end of his time here. But yeah, there's some interesting scores. It's still bizarre now to look back and see Liverpool just getting through.
Yeah.
In this, 2-1 against GAC, which when I think of GAC and Liverpool, it's got a completely different meaning. You know, but they're in there. Manchester United, although they progressed with absolute minimum of fuss. Inter are in there, again, minimum of fuss. You're right, Benfica don't make it through. Monaco, finalists the year before, and there they are. And of course, something you will never, ever see ever again. The last fixture, Wisla Krakow losing 2-0 and 3-1 to a certain Real Madrid. It's only 20 years ago. It feels like forever when Real Madrid, Manchester United, Inter Milan, et al. Are in the qualifying rounds.
Yep, prehistoric now, really. Okay, those group stages then, as we're in a bit of a groove now, listeners, now that we're in this group stage, last 16 and onwards format, very much the show, first show is about the group stage. And, oh, come on, there's not a lot of drama in the group stage, you may say. Group A, well, it did have drama, and if you don't know by now, then maybe this will remind you.
Mellor, lovely cushion header, but Gerrard, you beauty! What a head, son! What a head!
Adam, that's our esteemed former manager, one that you know well, scoring for Liverpool very late in match day 6 at home to Olympiacos. Going to get there in a minute because that late third goal in a 3-1 win put them through. 2-1 would not have done. How did Liverpool make such heavy weather of this? They beat Monaco at home, and then they struggle in Greece. They can't beat La Coruña at home, and La Coruña end up with 2 points. It really was dicey with that last game at Anfield.
It was. They're just a weird team. I think at this time, I have to be honest. They relied the opening game as well. Barros getting that late clincher, what we call it, a second goal. It's not a winner. But yeah, away to Deportivo as well. It's an own goal gets them through. It's very dull, to be honest. Not really high scoring up until that last game. But even then, those like you mentioned, that's 2 late goals in that game to get them going. Yeah, it's probably why I'm not a huge fan of the team,
because it's chaos.
It's chaos. It's
but Benítez
functional.
Isn't a chaos manager, though, is he?
It's
a controller.
It's tricky because I would think that, but then you look at some of these players that we're going to talk about here, and you've got Jimmy Traore, Steve Finnan, those guys in there that come in and do a job and do better than the sum of their parts in there. But yeah, it's just not got, I don't know, not got a style to it. There's no attacking verve. There's none of that. We're going to come on to another manager who gets criticised for having none of that, and Jose Mourinho, but that's absolutely not the case for the first 2 years at Chelsea. It is probably pound for pound the most balanced team that I've seen, certainly in those first 2 years. But Benítez maybe just didn't have that. He didn't have the swagger of the manager. He didn't have the personality, and I think you probably see that in the team. You've got Gerrard, who's inspirational, absolutely, but outside of that, there's decent players. There's functional players. Didi Hamann was a lovely player, but match winner, swashbuckling, he's probably not. And then in attack, Barros, Kewell, Luis Garcia, fine, good. Not a patch on what Chelsea have got. So yeah, I think there's maybe just a little bit of that. That's why it makes it such a great win and great victory, because it is a team cobbled together, if you want to put it that way. It's probably a little bit harsh, but it's a team that is sort of cobbled together into something great in that second half in Istanbul. So it's not really a huge surprise to me when you look at the team and you get rid of the emotion around it, that they're sort of struggling to get through in a group that isn't that tough, to be honest. There's no massive star. They're all maybe much of a muchness. We spoke about Deportivo very much on the way down now, and I think 2 draws and out this year sums that up. So yeah, it's just okay. It's just functional, but I feel like that's kind of what they were.
Davey, this is Benítez just in situ at Liverpool. Chelsea have got a new manager as well that Adam's hinted at. Cobbled together, Adam thought might be too harsh. It kind of isn't in these first few months. That game at home to Olympiacos, right? So Liverpool win, they join Olympiacos, I think, in 10 points, but it'll go on head-to-head, and Olympiacos have beaten Liverpool 1-0 away, so no away goal in place, and Olympiacos go ahead. Chris Kirkland is in goal. Jerzy Dudek, who will be the hero in a couple of weeks, watching on from the bench. So he's not settled, anywhere near settled in some key areas. But he was beaten, a free kick that really should have been saved. The wall doesn't do its job, but hit by a certain Rivaldo, making very much a kind of encore performance.
Yeah, he was great last night. And it's one of these groups, Martin, that nobody, because there's one complete Diddy team in it, and we're going to see that in the next group as well, that it becomes a three-way race. And even for Olympiacos, going out with 10 points is unfortunate. So whichever one of these teams is dropping out can say they were a bit unfortunate here, because there is a complete no-hoper team. And Liverpool are struggling because they are one of the points that the complete no-hoper team gets. I thought Adam was a little bit harsh on this Liverpool team because I think it had a very strong core. It had Stefan Honshaw, Sami Hupia, Jamie Carragher. It had Steven Gerrard, Xabi Alonso, and of course Didi Hamann. So I think it had a lot of talent in it, although primarily central. Then it had a lot of good players. You weren't winning a title with this team, I think it's fair to say, in England over 38 games. Not that year anyway, I mean, my goodness. Because it lacked... I think, Adam, would it be fair to say that it's a bit of a colourless side is maybe the description? It just...
Yeah.
You know, with the exception of Gerrard, there isn't a lot that's going to get you off your seat. Harry Kewell, by this stage, is an absolute shadow of the guy who was at Leeds. Whether it was injuries, I don't know, but
just couldn't make that step up, David.
He just
a big club.
Yeah, he just is an absolute shadow of what he was. Garcia, I thought was okay. Thought he was decent. Baros, hot and cold. Smeacher, the same. Injury issues there, but in this particular match, Rivaldo was great, Martin. He really was.
I mean, he was just marauding through.
Yeah,
I think Happy had to take him out at one point, and
yeah.
I mean, Adam, I don't know how long did he have left in his career after this? I know he loved the club, did Rivaldo? He loved traipsing the world, playing for Christ knows what. But this must be the swan song at any kind of top level. But he still had something. And I think the fear is that run that he gets brought down. I think that's maybe with the free kick that he scores from. Actually, he just induces this fear because he is Rivaldo or Gary Wilmot.
He went to Milan. We spoke about that, didn't we, last time out? I think maybe after Barcelona, he went there for a year, did okay. Then he went back to Cruzeiro for a bit, but he comes to Greece and he's here. He's in Greece for 4 years and he plays. He racks up about 150 appearances for Olympiacos and AEK Athens over the next 4 years. So, I mean, Greece is at this point. Greece football was the highest it's been. Maybe not necessarily in the league itself, but certainly in the European arena. So it's not the arse end of nowhere.
Yeah. The one thing throughout this show, the Greeks have punched their weight, despite this. Because I wouldn't have thought that going into it, but you know they've punched their weight to this stage in the tournament. I think the famous Anfield atmosphere, which is in full voice, there is a certain type of footballer, opposition footballer, who comes in and is inspired by it. And Rivaldo, I thought, was just cutting a bit like, yeah, here we go. This is where I should. This is it. And that, you know, place going nuts, massive game, everything on the line, and he's brilliant. He really is. And this is then one of these Liverpool comebacks that the players and the fans have this symbiotic relationship. They've done it before this. They'll do it many times after it. But this is why Gerrard had the reputation. It's nights like this. It's occasions like this where he just goes, and we can talk about, what was it he said to you one time, Adam? Tactics don't matter. This is one of these nights where he is literally playing like that. And when it comes off, it's very memorable. And, you know, it is Roy of the Rovers, Brian Robson, Captain Marvel stuff. And the goal, of course, became incredibly famous because Sky used it for years as one of their adverts. Yeah.
Cinema Pongo, Adam. It must have been a Hooley signing who gets Liverpool back. He came on at half time, I think, actually. Instant impact. Neil Mellor, because again, nothing really happens. And then Neil Mellor scores maybe with 10 minutes to go. And you're like, right, this is kind of set up. Liverpool need this third. But there's a lot of hype around Neil Mellor as well.
He did quite well when he came in, Neil Mellor. And the best thing about Neil Mellor is that he looked like if you had ordered Steven Gerrard off TV.
Looked like his wee brother, didn't he? Yeah.
He absolutely did. He looked like his younger, less talented brother. But a weird career because, you know, he actually did all right at Liverpool as a squad player, right? But then when he left, his career didn't amount to much at all, and now he's probably better known as a Sky reporter on Soccer Saturday. He's probably more known for that now, but you forget that when he did come through, but there was a lot of hope for all of these guys. You know, him, Litalik was another one, Cinema Pongoli, who, if memory serves, I think might have ended up at Ross County. So yeah, a strange era. This, of course, is under the pre-FSG ownership, and getting money out of them wasn't as easy as people might assume. They weren't all that keen on spending money. So if you actually look at Liverpool's transfers in the summer, it's a bit of a mixed bag. You've got Xabi Alonso, wonderful player, much sought after, that Liverpool signed. One of the few that I think Ferguson admitted to regretting missing job lot signings at the bottom end of the scale, punts, even, for want of a better word.
I think it sums it up for me, because I remember Litalik and Cinema Pongo appearing, but I never necessarily thought we were on the cusp of the class of '92 reborn, with all these talented youngsters waiting to come through. And maybe that was it. It sort of felt like they didn't have much money, like you said, David. Even looking at their bench in that Olympiacos game, it's Stefan Honshaw, Salif Diao, Josemi, Cinema Pongo, Stephen Warnock, and Neil Mellor for Liverpool in the Champions League. That's about it.
By the way, I was wrong. I'd like to clarify. It was David Ngog, the Liverpool youngster, who ended up at Ross County. Florent Cinema Pongoli ended up at Dundee United, which in some ways is even worse.
Oh, I don't remember that at all.
I knew he'd kicked about for a few games in Scotland, because it stuck with me, because I remember him from this era. Then he sort of disappears, and a few years later he's playing in Scotland. But it's that Adam nailed it right at the start, man. This is a weird squad. When you look at it, the makeup of it, you go from genuine top talent level superstars right through to kind of never will be's at the bottom end of it, and every type of player in between. And it's just so. But then again, I never got the impression that, and we'll talk about this in later years, that Benítez was particularly comfortable with, if you like, maverick players, other than Gerrard, who he had to put up with, and he wasn't daft in it, although Gerrard's book makes clear they were never close, and he never felt particularly appreciated by. They signed, do you remember they signed Robbie Keane for, I think, 20 million? And he spoke about, we need someone who can come in and give us a wee bit something different, something not more off the cuff. And then after about 5 games, panicked and just hardly ever played him, because he could not handle Benítez, a player who played off the cuff, who didn't relentlessly. He was all about control. It must be controlled. It must be done in a certain fashion. And he literally spends this money on a player who's not that, and then after about 5 games goes, no, I can't have that, and goes running back to the less talented players who will run in the lines that he tells them to.
And Hooley was the same, I think, to an extent. So it's maybe not surprising that that's the squad that's there, given that Hooley was the manager for 6 years before this. So maybe not a huge surprise. A wee word, Martin, before we move on to Group A, a wee word for Maicon. European debut season at Monaco. This year, scores in that last game, the 5-0 Deportivo game, that sees Monaco go through as
winners.
First winners, yeah. Great. I feel Maicon gets overshadowed by Dani Alves, who we very much will come on to, as David said last time, football only. We will come on to when he's at Barcelona, but Maicon was sensational. We're going to come and speak about Chelsea and what they did with their fullbacks that was new and innovative, certainly as far as the Premier League was concerned. But then you've got Maicon absolutely tearing up Serie A in a couple of years with those rampaging runs from deep. So yeah, a wee word for him. Adebayor scores in this one as well. I would say this is probably his breakout season. I think he's got another year before he goes to Arsenal potentially.
Yeah.
After this, so a few that we can keep an eye on.
Yeah, a few there in Monaco, but it's not going to be a great season for them. We'll cover that obviously in due course. Group B, some old favourites here. Davy, Bayer Leverkusen, Real Madrid. Finalists, 2 years before this game was played. Leverkusen absolutely battered Real in Germany in the first game, 3-0. Dimitar Berbatov on the score sheet and maybe really coming to the fore here. Novotny as well, I suppose. One of those players. Dynamo Kiev, who we have loved covering over the course of this show, just missing out on progression. They end up with 10 points. Bayern and Real had 11, which means there must be, as you've already mentioned, another absolute wooden spoon contender from the off, and it's Roma, Davey.
Roma,
who I've got a soft spot for and have done okay, but off to a dreadful start. Anders Frisk, more of whom later, hit by a coin from the Roma support. The game was stopped. Kiev got a 3-0 win. They were already winning 1-0. Just what's going on here? It's just a disaster of a season for Roma.
The season of 4 managers. The Roma faithful refer to this as Fabio Capello left in the summer because of the financial pressures that were under. Probably more pertinently, Walter Samuel and Emerson left as well.
Huge players for him in their title.
Enormous players. So they, as I say, they go through 4 managers in the year. They finish 8th. They get to the Coppa Italia final, but they lose. But it is the Champions League. They are abysmal. I mean, they are awful, and it costs Cesare Prandelli his job. He goes early in the season. Rudi Voller gets brought in for a bit. He of the poodle haircut and spit in his hair, famously, Frank Rijkaard. But they are a debacle in this group, really terrible. And it was a grim time for Roma because there were real worries. The bubble has burst now in Italy. We've been talking about even round about 2001, 2002 they're spending. That is like, funnily enough, to borrow a phrase, the last days of Rome, when clubs are spending and then the bubble goes. And Roma were one of the clubs. Parma, we know, never really never got close to the gain in the States they had before it. And there were real issues about whether Roma and Lazio would be going concerns. And eventually they're taking over. But it does lead to a number of years of worry for their support, as we know, similarly how debilitating that can be, just how distressing it is when that happens. But they are really bad in this. Dynamo Kiev, now this is a real tough group. And again, I think you get 10 points at the start of this group when you don't know how bad Roma are going to be in it. Then I think if you are Dynamo Kiev and they tell you you're getting 10 points, I think you have the right to be absolutely heartbroken at not qualifying from this group. Real Madrid do enough, and as they have a tendency to do, but it's not vintage from them. But you are absolutely correct about this striker with a velvet touch who is playing at Leverkusen, and a lot of clubs were casting envious eyes at him. One of my favourite non-Rangers players, so I'll admit an inherent bias here right at the start, a lovely footballer, but there was more to him than just the ability to take the ball out of the air and cushion it perfectly, although he could do that at all angles. But people forget what a wonderful link player he was as well, Martin, and
very clever,
excellent finisher. A joy, I think, for any striker to play with. Wayne Rooney profited a lot from Berbatov assists in his Manchester United time, because you've got two clever players, and they were able to do that. But this was the first sign of, whoa, this boy's a bit special, to the point where I must admit I was a little surprised he ended up at Tottenham.
I'm just going to throw that over to Adam, because he's got another year in him, I think, at Leverkusen. Adam, he goes to Spurs in 06. I mean, was that a surprise?
Yeah, I would say so. Because he's been a Champions League regular.
He was in the Leverkusen squad when they got to the final, right?
Yep. Yeah, he was. Played quite a bit. Scored,
I think he scored
15,
in the
16 goals.
Yeah, I think he scored in the
15, 16 goals, I'm sure. We said that season. And he does have another couple of years there, like you said, and goes, and he is great for Spurs. Is it maybe one of those? I mean, he was great for Man United as well, so maybe not. But is there maybe a little bit about him of the Ginolas where you maybe thrive in a sort of big fish, small pond type of thing? It wasn't a huge transfer fee from memory.
10 million. Yeah, you're right. 10.
So, I think it is one of those that's maybe a little bit of a surprise. But I feel like he probably did suit them when you think about it. He really, the type of personality he is, the confidence he's got in himself. He could go there and be a god, to be honest. So yeah, I can kind of see it. But there's no denying that the last couple of years at Leverkusen and the first couple of years at Spurs, very, very good player. Loads and loads and loads of goals.
The knock on him, and I think maybe Martin, and remember, of course, that the draw for players going to England anyway is now but London has that huge draw, as we know, for non-British players. But I think the knock on him at the time was it was felt he lacked pace, and it was never. You wouldn't ever say that it was, when you looked at him, yeah, he's lightning, because he wasn't. But there was a slight feeling. A languid style.
He's huddled a wee bit further up the pitch, and that's why the Spurs thing was just kind of perfect.
That's why the Spurs thing worked. But I think also that we've discussed this with other players, and it's certainly a thing, very much a thing now. A recent example that I always use to sort of illustrate this is Vincent van Dijk. Virgil van Dijk, sorry, at Liverpool, where Liverpool were aware of him. They were aware of him before he went to Celtic, but they want to see how he gets on in the Premiership first. And I do wonder if a few clubs were, should we? And then, okay, he's away to Tottenham. And the inflation at that time is, if you spent, 10 million they paid for him, that United knew it wasn't going to be 80 million if he did well at Tottenham. So you could do that a wee bit more than you can kind of do it now, because he has those years at Tottenham, and then he's off to Manchester. But I think that was the only concern, was, is he quick enough? And look, if you want to play, a 4-3-3, probably not. He couldn't. He's not one of these strikers that we go, he could operate anywhere along the front three. He couldn't. You had to tailor your game to him. But what a player, if you did.
You think of Vincent van Gogh here, David? Adam, David makes a good point there, by the way, about the pace. I remember reading a piece in World Soccer after the 2002 World Cup. It was a kind of overview of the tournament, and for the life of me, I can't remember who came up with this phrase, but basically said it's robot wars. It's fit athletes, quick, functional, shuttle players. We're maybe losing a bit of the grace and a bit of the guys who just want to take a wee bit more time in the ball. Is that the doubts for the mega clubs? And Davies, I think, raised that point there, that football it's not the 80s anymore, or the 70s even, that you need an engine, and you need to be fitting into my workhouse here, or there's no dice. Do people just not trust that languid artist?
I think so, because it's a good point, because as you were talking, I was just thinking, well, where else would he go? Summer 2006, Arsenal aren't signing anybody over the age of 17. I think at this point, to be honest, because and they don't have the money to do it. Berbatov's not going to Chelsea when Didier Drogba's there. Liverpool, the signings that they made, I mean, at this time, Dirk Kuyt signs for kind of be far off what Berbatov was, but that maybe sums up the style at the time. Like you said, we'll get someone in. Dirk Kuyt was fantastic for them, but an entirely different player. Again, not going to Man United when Rooney and Van Nistelrooy are there smashing it up. Spurs finished 5th or 6th this season, didn't they? Going to Europe, so maybe when process of elimination. It's a Spurs, it's a Newcastle, Blackburn Rovers round about this time. Trying to think of who else was kicking about that was probably close to Europe. So maybe he's thought about it logically and thought, yeah, okay, I'll go there for a couple of years and get the move that he got.
Yeah, fair fucks them. Group C, another Italian side, Adam, and it's Fabio Capello's Juventus through 60. Now, looking at the top of this group, just looking at it without even looking at the scores, 3 huge clubs that have won it in recent years, mega clubs, Juve, Bayern, and Ajax. Didn't really turn out that way, to be honest. Juve and Bayern well ahead, Ajax with 4 points, as well as Maccabi Tel Aviv at the bottom. But Juve, I mean, this is just gorgeous. 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0. And then a fucking 1-1 away in Israel in match day 6 when they're already kind of through. It's just, I'm welling up here. I mean, Fabio's done the biz at Milan. He's won the title with Roma. Expectations in Turin.
Yeah, it's a strange kind of time for them. I think obviously they've got Ibrahimovic this season, who makes the move from Ajax to Juve. Not quite at the stage where he's winning a title in every season as would come later on. But yeah, this is Calciopoli season, isn't it? Or one of the Calciopoli seasons. Yeah. So it's obviously a little bit difficult to talk about what they could be, because nothing really happens and they get, well, things do happen very much so, but they get relegated. Mark Giuliano's still kicking about, the absolute dick that he is. So the less said about that, the better. Yeah, they're fine. They've got loads of firepower. They've got Cannavaro, one of those very above the board and totally normal deals, which sees Cannavaro, Adriano, a couple of others swapping about between Parma, Inter, and Juve. All very above board, I'm sure. So yeah, bit of a strange time of it, but you can't deny the squad that they've got and the manager that we've got. I've definitely had a newfound respect for Capello. Not that I didn't respect him anyway, but the manager that you think of with England is maybe not the manager certainly not the manager he was in the early stages with Milan. He's probably becoming that now. So had a bit of a newfound respect for him. So much firepower. They've still got Del Piero. They've still got Trezeguet. Mutu's there as well, but they're supplementing it, like I said, with Ibrahimovic and a couple of others. Marco Zalieta coming through as well. Never quite hit it off, but they've got loads of firepower, which we're used to way back when we spoke about that Juventus team that got to the final with a different striker every year. We're probably used to seeing that, but maybe not for a while. So it's great that they're back in it, obviously, but it won't be for very long.
And Nedved's still making the difference in games as well.
Still kicking the ball. Yep.
Group D then, Davey. Manchester United really should have won this group. A bit of transition. This is a transition United side. We know that. Nowhere near the league title in England. That's not really was, but it's Chelsea and Arsenal seem to be the narrative there at this minute in time. But really should have won the group. And had this 3-0 defeat in Turkey against Fenerbahçe on the final day, which meant they fell into second place, and that has an impact when it comes to being seeded and unseeded in that last 16 draw. But it's Lyon, Davy, that win the group, a club on the rise. Buying well, SN's there, Viltord's there, Juninho, of course, is there, Flora Maluda, Diarra, it's, all looking good. Great manager, of course. You couldn't fail anywhere. We've just been so used. You talk about the Greeks earlier, but this show is just, there's always a French presence in a significant way. Just about every season we do. And this we are coming into Lyon's time here.
Yeah, we are. Eric Abidal, of course, and Paul Le Guen looking like the master of all before him. And it was only in retrospect you realised it was the club, much in the way that maybe Brighton are a modern equivalent of that they were just perfectly well run. A great example of it, whenever we talk about transfer models, we talk about Ajax, don't we? Right. Well, here is how it's supposed to work. Lyon had some success. They were then spending the likes of 8 million on a player called Michael Essien, who they then sold a year later for 25 million. That's how it works. You don't just, you have to buy as well. And the point isn't just that you bring in players at 100 grand and sell them for 5 million. The point is then you take that 5 million and you spend 3, and you bring in a player in the following year, you get rid of him for, 10, 15, and so on. And they were doing it, and they were doing it really, really well at this point. United are a weird side this season, Martin, aren't they? They're, as you say, transition, neither fish nor fowl at this point, I think it's fair to say. A lot of questions about Ferguson, a lot of questions about his possible obsolescence raised their head in this period when there are exciting new things happening in England. There's a guy who arrives, we're going to talk about, like, my God, this guy with these resources, this can't fail. You've got then Benítez showing what can be done as well, and for all that Liverpool not winning a title, you just know that Liverpool winning a Champions League would really sting Ferguson at this point. To think that this wee Spanish lad had at this point matched them must have hurt. But yeah, there was a lot of talk about what that side was, and it's not a vintage side. I think it's fair to say when you look at it. But it starts, he uses the period, the fallow period, to begin to rebuild, and he builds a great side that goes on and has a lot of success. But it did have that couple of years. I think we all remember the end of this season when Chelsea, already the champions, went to Old Trafford and spanked them 3-0, and it just, it was like, I mean, now when Man United get beat 3-0 at Old Trafford, it's like day of the week with a Y in it. But back then,
they get the Guard of Honour, and they were just battered about. But Rooney had gone there. That was the big transfer.
It's his hat trick on his
but
debut.
He's very young. Oh yeah, I mean, against Fenerbahçe, of course, in that group game, Adam. I mean, that's a way to announce yourself at a big club on the biggest stage. But there is still, I guess, this understanding with Ronaldo as well, that there's youth about this United team, and Ferguson's creating his fourth side, maybe third. And that's going to take a bit of time because Chelsea and Arsenal look very, very established. So a bit of time for some, but David's right. There's broadsheet journalists who during this season and next are saying, yeah, it's over, really.
It's over until it's not. I think this next iteration of Manchester United is one of my favourite teams of this period. I'm pretty sure I've said that about 15 times on this show, but I like everything that Liverpool aren't at this stage. Manchester United will go and become just that swashbuckling verve that they've got with Tevez, Rooney, Ronaldo. It's just incredible. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that they're not quite at that stage now. Albeit they've got Van Nistelrooy still. I know we've mentioned him a few times. Still just about hanging in there. They've got Luis Saha coming in as well. Cristiano Ronaldo is obviously well in the door by now and well on his way. We've got this sort of battle there, haven't you, between Rooney and Ronaldo, who's dominated the summer in Euro 2004, and then coming into this season. But yeah, it feels a little bit disjointed. Still a load of players in there that would go on to be functional members of a team, but not quite players that can make a big difference in this season. So I think it's probably fair where they are. And I guess it is all going in cycles, isn't it? The great Premier League seasons for me are when you get two teams going at it, like we've seen with Arsenal and Man United, and then Arsenal and Chelsea. Chelsea kind of drop off after Mourinho goes in some respects, and United come back into it, and then it sort of trades places until Man City's domination. So I think maybe that's a point here as well. It was sort of Chelsea, Arsenal, and then Chelsea, Liverpool to some degree as well, and United didn't really quite have that rivalry with someone at this point.
Yeah, I'd be very interested as this United team develops, because they're going to take a couple more stings, I think, before they really get going back in the Champions League, and they're not a million miles away from winning it, of course. But interesting to use the word swashbuckling there, because I think this Ferguson team is one of the best counter-attacking teams I've ever seen, and that was, I'm not saying a complete departure, because I think one of his first Premier League team was quite good at that, especially with Sharp and Kanchelskis and that kind of pace. But my word, and there's a Champions League semi-final in particular against another English team to come in a few years, which was just the most devastating example of counter-attacking football. And I think because United's Tora thing, I think that was slightly misplaced. I think it's one of the more reactive sides in the league, but to devastating effect. But we will come to that in due course. Group E, Arsenal won, just same points as PSV Eindhoven. We're going to look a lot at PSV, I think, in the next episode. Adam, Panathinaikos, the bloody Greeks, still kicking about. You know, they had 9 points, just about doing the business there, and they go through to the UEFA Cup. But yeah, not a lot to say about that group. Shall we go to Group F, where Celtic prop up the table, Shakhtar Donetsk in the UEFA Cup, and Milan and Barca at the top. Davey, there's some very typical Celtic in Europe kind of results here. Credible 0-0 draw with Milan, who are already through, to be fair, beating Shakhtar 1-0, but getting their pants pulled down in the Ukraine. Just can't seem to go away and do it, even when they come back in Milan. I think Stan Varga equalises with like 15 minutes to go. They still lose 3-1. They just can't seem to get the job done. But I guess the big narrative was Larsson coming home and scoring, which was funny.
Yes, it was very funny. And the fact that he came on and some of them booed him, I thought was just, wild. I mean, come on. Right. And by the way, I do, I'm not somebody who likes to see us applaud opposition players or any of that shite, but come on, do you know what I mean? You don't do that. But yeah, it is in their heads. I was going to say that it still is. Here we are 20 years later. Since 2000, Celtic have lost 70 away matches in Europe across all the competitions. 70. That's incredible. I mean, that genuinely is astonishing. It's just deeply ingrained within them at that club. And the Donetsk game, I think, was one that they'd convinced themselves, if I recall correctly, that they were going to go and do something in and they got taken apart. I mean, it was an absolute doing that night. Just that Shakhtar team actually was quite fun to watch, wasn't it? Very fluid.
Championship manager legend Julius Agahawa up top.
Julius Agahawa, yes, and so he was a signing in Champ Manager, but they were very good, very fluid, very enjoyable to watch. But yeah, it's still a thing to the point where, and we just found this out last week, much to our amusement, that they actually have a song about hoping to win away from home in Europe. They actually have a song about it. And we're not making this up, listen. I know you're all going to get in the comments and go, come on, Davey. They do. We've seen the footage.
The last group then, guys, is the arrival of Mourinho with Chelsea. And of course, Adam, he's pitted alongside Porto, the club he has just left, and Siska and Paris Saint-Germain. They don't fuck about, do they really? 4 wins in the first 4 games, get everything sorted. Porto needing to win, I think, in the last game where Chelsea go to Portugal and somehow do. So maybe there's a wee gift there, but what Drogba and Carvalho and Cech and Ferreira, who else did he bring in that summer? Robin.
Yep.
It just, with some, to be fair, to Ranieri, some decent signings the season before, Makaleli, of course, and Lampard and Terry already there, but just they instantly just looked as if this manager and this team had been together. This was not a slow start in England. It was, for quite a while, the Portuguese man of 4. In other words, he's going to win the domestic treble and the Champions League at some stage. They just looked immediately brilliant. And good old Kevin Keegan's Manchester City, the first team to beat them.
Yeah, so I think this summer changes everything, doesn't it? Really, as far as modern football is concerned, certainly, but certainly as far as the Premier League is concerned. There's a really good podcast on Jonathan Wilson's new one. It was what it was, the overlap one with, what's his name? Rob Draper. Talking about the Abramovich takeover and Jonathan Wilson, obviously massive history buff in terms of football, but he sort of talks about this being the third phase of football, if you like, or the third act, basically kicking off the year before, obviously, when Abramovich comes in. But he says up until maybe the Second World War, it was the players who ruled the roost, and then you had 60 years or so of the manager, the cult of the manager. The manager would be mythical. He'll do this and he'll do that. He'll take all the plaudits and all that sort of stuff. But then he says from 2003 onwards, it's very much the owner is the man now. And I think you could probably argue that has predominantly been the case for the last 20 years. When you look at billionaires coming in, the Glazers buying shares around about this time as well, I think it's difficult to argue with it. So obviously there is a turbocharged feel to everything. And I think this Chelsea team being the first team that really comes out of that artificial financial doping, whatever you would like to call it, I think is makes it worth it for me, to be honest. They were terrific. That's what I said earlier on. The balance that they had, and there, I don't know. It's kind of probably worth digging into them individually. I guess, because he starts this 2004-2005 season with a bit of a narrow 4-4-2 diamond. He's got Gudjohnsen playing a lot, and he was terrific this year. Gudjohnsen and Drogba playing a fair bit with Mattia Kezman in reserve, but very quickly he changes to the 4-3-3 that we know and love. We spoke a lot about Claude Makelele in that position before. We've seen plenty of defensive midfielders, but I think this particular type of defensive midfielder was new for for England. We hadn't seen something like this before. Even 3-man midfields are still not a thing at this stage. So that was the big plus point. He said when he came in, basically, it doesn't really matter what two players you've got in the middle. I've got 3 players that will dominate, and it was all this opposition analysis, manipulation of space, understanding where and how to attack, opening up different areas of the pitch that British football just hadn't thought about at this stage. There was so much innovation in here, and I think sometimes that can be underrated when we focus on the players and the manager. But some of the things that he was doing at this stage were groundbreaking for British football. Even Terry and Carvalho, David, I know we've spoken about them before. John Terry gets a bad rep for being a horrible human being,
Yes,
which is valid. But I also don't think he's thought of as being as good on the ball as he was. Certainly at this time, at 2004, he's terrific on the ball for what other centre halves are.
He
Not as
always
good as
was, Raul.
Carvalho.
He's
Yeah,
passing.
but you don't think of it. You think Terry is the old-fashioned English centre half. Rio Ferdinand is maybe the guy that's good on the ball.
That's it.
It's just not the case.
No, it's not. And the idea that he was basically, a modern day Steve Bruce is nonsense. He was, yes, he could do your heroic, head anything, last ditch defending stuff. He could do that, of course he could. But he was a terrific passer of the ball, a quick passer of the ball, Adam, as well. He would quite confidently push up. He would quite confidently break lines and do it very, very well, which was another thing in there. Now, it helps if you've got Ricardo Carvalho next to you, because you can take that risk a wee bit more freely than because you have this ultimate sweeping centre back behind you who is alive to absolutely everything. But Terry didn't go wandering with the ball randomly. It was very much planned, and it was an extra. I always go back to a few years ago. I saw an interview with the Jamie Carragher. He was asked who would he take out of. And Carragher knew a bit about defending, and he was asked, and he said Terry was a more complete centre back than Ferdinand. And at the time, it just, and even more so now, it flies in the face of that orthodoxy. It's true. It is true though, definitely. Because I think that if you take the great Manchester United pairing of Vidic and Ferdinand, Terry could play both those roles. Ferdinand couldn't. So it does make sense, but his personality, out with the Chelsea fans, and the type of person he is overshadows what type of footballer he is. In a different way to say Beckham, where we've discussed that people actually don't appreciate Beckham's full range of abilities because, the celebrity thing maybe sometimes overshadows that. In this case, John Terry being, to all appearances, we don't know him individually, but I mean, he says he quite likes Celtic. I rest my case.
One of the last things he's come out with, but he looks like your rugged, tough, no nonsense England centre half. I mean, he does. He looks like Butcher, and there's another player who is nowhere near as revered as he should have been for his ability on the ball. Both of them had a left foot that could find a player in 60 yards, not just punt the ball up and hope that it hits the head of a big lump up front. The actual pinpoint targeted long range passing, comfortable bringing the ball out, but because they'll run through brick walls, we need to paint them one. We can't. It's as if
we focus on
hope with the two thoughts in our head at the one time.
Yeah, and
I think
this Chelsea side. Oh, sorry, Adam, but watch this Chelsea side, Mark. See, to your point there, watch the quick switches of play to the wings. The wingers that Chelsea used were so effective, so important. But watch the amount of times, if you go back and watch this Chelsea 2004-2005, watch the amount of attacks that start with a quick switch from him. But it's not a long, because he's got Drogba. If he's just hitting it long, right, you can just vaguely aim it in his direction. It's not that. It's a quick, deliberate switch of play. The ball goes out to the winger. Drogba occupies defender. Who's arriving late in the box for his 30 goals that season? Frank Lampard. all designed, but you need a top centre half to be able to do that.
And I think the unique part of this for me was both of them were that guy. Like, they were similar, they were complete, but we're used to, even now, I still talk about it now for Rangers, that we need a ball playing centre half, and we need a physical guy beside him. You could argue Ferdinand Vidic is the absolute epitome of that coming up, but both of these guys were just, they didn't have those deficiencies, if you like. They didn't need to work well together because they worked well on their own, if that's the easiest way to make sense, but they did work well together as well. It was, I think I said earlier on, I don't think Mourinho ever manages to get this balance back again that he's got in these first 2 years. I'm really looking forward to digging into Milan and why it went the way it did, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean why it was that type of cynical football that he then becomes known for. I understand it in Madrid because you're trying to be the polar opposite of something that you don't like, and you think that's the best way to do it. But I'm interested to chart how that works, because David, to your point, the wingers, I mean, Robin gets one over a goal or an assist every game this season. And it's like 1 point. I've actually got stats to work with now, which is great. So be prepared for more of them. But it's 1.14 goals or assists per 90 minutes, just behind Henry for his first season there. Damien Duff, Joe Cole, just terrific players here. But they would switch the wingers, which isn't something that you'd never seen. You'd have Robin on one side and Duff on the other, and they just switch halfway through the games. And one would, if you were on that side, you would come in on your right foot, or you'd go down the outside. You had to be two-way. It wasn't what we see now, where everybody plays on the opposite side and all they do is cut in. You had to be a two-way guy because you were going to play on one side. There, even the fullbacks as well. I mentioned attacking fullbacks, not necessarily in the sense that we see now or we've seen even a few years later, but Wayne Bridge could shift. He would get up there. William Gallas, even when he played at left back, as he did in the second season, could shift as well. Ferreira on the other side, maybe more defensive, but was still supporting, getting forwards. Glenn Johnson as well. And then cementing all in the middle, you've got Makelele. Essien wasn't there, as we said. He doesn't come until the season after, but they've got Thiago Mendes, who was good, was functional, was a kind of halfway between a 6 or an 8. He would give them a little bit more balance when Wayne Bridge went forward. Makelele would drift into that sort of left-hand side to cover, and Thiago would drop deep. This is Lampard's second season, I think, at Chelsea, but he's properly unleashed, I would say, this year from Mourinho as the kind of box-to-box guy arriving late in the box.
Lampard had been there since 2001, but this really, he might as well not have been. I mean, he just gets this lease of life. He would have ran through fire for Mourinho. He just was always in his ear, said, "No, you're world class." To be fair, he had enjoyed a good season before that. He was excellent at Euro 2004. He is brilliant in this Champions League season.
So there's obviously a part of, and this is what I think makes analysis of this so interesting, because there's a part of, where are you going to be that guy anyway? Were you just going to be that guy because of everything, in spite of everything, in the way that Gerrard was? Or have you got a manager who gets that 10-15% extra out of you that makes you become that guy? I don't think we'll ever really know. But yeah, for me, like I said, the most tactically complete Premier League team of that point, 100%. The balance was incredible. They had wing backs forming the attack, and it was a front five at times, but they still kept the door closed. We've spoke about their record defensively: 25 clean sheets, 15 goals all season. I think they got 10 clean sheets in a row at one point over winter, which but all of that, and then the attacking talent that they had as well. Drogba up there. I remember they signed Drogba, and I was like, "Who is this? Like, who's this guy coming in?" Yeah. That's a bit bizarre. Yeah. And he absolutely smashed it. No, they were brilliant.
People forget though the first season that it was all, remember, the diver about Drogba. That was he really wasn't appreciated out with Chelsea. Maybe because
he wasn't. My big thing about that Mourinho first season was him going on about his squad size. He wanted it basically an international tournament squad, 23. or 24 or whatever, 2 players for every position and the ability to do other things. And that's it. And they're all quality. And you don't have to be having a nervous breakdown if you have to use one player, or if someone gets injured, that it's the end of the world. Easy when you're spending that kind of money, of course, and he very much did. Okay, we will pick that up and more next week. Thank you, Davey.
A pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
And it is a very different Mourinho team, free-flowing, lots of goals, but that cynicism was there if you knew where to look for it, like a laundry basket, for example. Until next time, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts, and breakdowns dropping every other day.